They cut down my trees to improve their golf course view. So I shut down their entire $1 million upgrade. Yeah, that's not an exaggeration. That's exactly what happened. And the crazy part is, it all started with a smile. Not a threat, not a warning, just one of those polite, corporate smiles that says, we're going to do this anyway. So picture this. I live in what used to be a quiet, borderline boring neighborhood just outside a mid-sized city. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy, just clean streets, decent neighbors, and one weird luxury feature. My backyard backed up directly to a private golf course. And no, I'm not a golfer. Never have been. I bought the place 8 years ago because of something way better than the course itself, the trees. I'm talking about 4 massive red oaks, tall, thick, old enough to look like they'd been there before the course even existed. They lined the back edge of my property like a natural wall, gave me privacy, shade, and honestly, peace. No golfers staring into my yard, no stray balls landing near my patio, just this quiet green buffer that made the place feel like my own little pocket of space. And I made sure, before I ever signed the papers, I checked the property survey twice. Those trees weren't close to the boundary. They were clearly inside it, several feet in, clean and undisputed. That mattered to me, because anything sitting on a boundary line, that's a future argument waiting to happen. For years, nothing happened. The course was old, kind of run down, the kind of place where retirees played slow games and nobody really cared about upgrades or aesthetics. And honestly, I liked it that way. Then everything changed. A development company came in, bought the entire golf course, and suddenly the place turned into a construction zone. New clubhouse, new landscaping, rumors about luxury homes lining the fairways. You could practically hear the property values trying to climb overnight. And with that came a certain type of people, suits, clipboards, and that same polite smile. About 2 months into the renovations, a guy knocked on my door, mid-40s, clean-cut, expensive watch, introduced himself as Evan Cole, project manager, and right away, you could tell he wasn't there for a friendly chat. He starts off casual, complimenting the property, talking about the improvements, the vision for the course, you know the script. Then he shifts. He says they're redesigning the fairway behind my house, adding a premium tee box, something about elevated player experience. And then he gestures toward the trees, my trees, and says, almost like it's an afterthought, they do block a pretty significant sightline. I just stood there for a second, because I already knew where this was going. So I said it clearly, calm, no attitude. Those trees are on my property. And he smiles, that same calm, practiced smile, and says, of course, we respect property boundaries. Now here's the thing. When someone says that a little too smoothly, it usually means they're already thinking about how to get around it. 2 weeks later, I left town for a long weekend. Nothing major, just visiting family. Didn't think twice about the house, the yard, any of it. Everything was normal when I left. When I came back, I knew something was wrong before I even opened the back door. The light felt different, too bright, too open, like something had been removed. I stepped outside, and it hit me immediately. The shade was gone. Those massive oak trees that used to block the sun? Gone. Not trimmed, not damaged, gone. All that was left were 4 clean, flat stumps lined up along the back edge of my yard like someone had erased them on purpose. No debris, no branches, just surgical removal. And beyond those stumps, a wide, unobstructed view straight into the golf course, clear as day, and in the distance, elevated just enough to overlook everything, sat their brand new tee box. And here's the kicker. From that tee box, you could see directly into my yard, my patio, my windows, everything. I didn't even process it right away. I just stood there, staring at the empty space where those trees had been, trying to make sense of it, like maybe I missed something. Maybe there was some explanation. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. I walked straight over to the maintenance crew on the course, a couple of guys working near the fairway, and I asked them what happened, and they didn't even hesitate. They said they were instructed to remove overgrown trees along the boundary. I told them those trees weren't overgrown, and they definitely weren't on their side. One of them just shrugged and said, "We just follow orders." And that right there, that's when it shifted from confusion to anger. Because now it wasn't just about trees anymore. It was about someone deciding that their view mattered more than my property. That night, I pulled out my original survey documents, spread them across the table, checked every line, every measurement, and there it was, clear as ever. The boundary line ran well beyond those stumps. Those trees weren't even close to the edge. They were mine. And the next morning, I didn't argue. I didn't call them first. I hired a professional surveyor. Because if you're going to fight something like this, you don't start with emotion, you start with proof. 2 days later, bright survey markers went into the ground, clean, visible, undeniable, and every single stump sat comfortably inside my side of the line. I took photos from every angle. Then I started digging, not in the yard, but into paperwork, permits, approvals, anything related to the construction happening behind my house. And that's when things got interesting. Because what I found wasn't just a mistake. It was a violation. All right, let's pause the story for a second, because this is where things go from annoying neighbor drama to something way more serious. And if you've ever owned property, or you're planning to, this part matters more than the revenge. According to standard procedure, anytime a developer modifies land in a way that affects drainage, elevation, or safety, like building a new tee box, they need county approval, not just a rubber stamp, but a conditional permit, meaning they're allowed to build only if they follow specific rules. And one of the most common conditions? Buffer zones. From a legal perspective, those trees behind my yard weren't just landscaping, they were a natural safety barrier. They reduce noise, block sight lines, and more importantly, they stop things like golf balls from turning into projectiles flying into someone's backyard. Remove that buffer, and now you've created a liability issue. And here's where it gets interesting, because developers don't just forget these conditions. They know them. They sign off on them. Which means if those trees were removed, someone either ignored the rules or assumed nobody would push back. This is a psychological trap a lot of homeowners fall into. Big company shows up, acts confident, throws around polished language, and people assume they must be in the right, so they stay quiet. But silence is exactly what allows this kind of overreach to happen. And once I realized they didn't just cut trees, they violated a permit condition, now the power dynamic flipped. Because I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was a problem they couldn't ignore. All right, now let's get back to what happened next. So once I realized this wasn't just some careless landscaping job, this was a straight-up permit violation, I stopped thinking like a homeowner and started thinking like someone building a case. No yelling, no emotional phone calls, just steps, clean and deliberate. First thing I did was file a formal complaint with the county planning department. Nothing dramatic, just documentation, photos of the stumps, the survey markers, and a note pointing out the missing buffer that was clearly required for that new tee box, and then I waited. Now here's the thing about counties. They don't move fast, but when liability is involved, they don't ignore it either. About a week later, 2 inspectors showed up. No warning. Just a white truck pulling up mid-morning, clipboards in hand, the kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself, and I knew right then. This was about to get real. I walked them to the back, showed them the markers, the stumps, explained exactly what happened. No exaggeration, no emotion, just facts. They measured everything, distances from the boundary line to each stump, took photos, compared it against the permit conditions, and you could see it on their faces. They already knew. One of them asked me a simple question. Have you had any issues with golf balls entering your property? And I just kind of laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the timing. Not before, I said, but give it a day. And that wasn't even a guess. Because with those trees gone, there was nothing left to stop a bad shot from coming straight into my yard. No barrier, no deflection, just open space. Then they walked over to the tee box, stood there for a minute, looking out over the fairway. And then one of them turned slightly, looking back toward my house, and I could see it click. Clear line of sight, clear risk. And just like that, the tone shifted. They didn't argue. They didn't debate. They didn't call anyone on the spot. They just wrote. A lot. The next morning, I got confirmation. Official notice had been issued. Stop use order. That brand new tee box? Closed. Immediately. No players. No practice. Nothing. Until the situation was resolved and compliance restored. Now imagine spending who knows how much money building a premium feature, marketing it, promoting it, only to have it shut down because you cut 4 trees you didn't own. That's not just inconvenient. That's expensive. 2 days later, there's a knock on my door. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Evan. Same clean shirt, same polished look, but the smile? Gone. Now he looked like someone trying to solve a problem that was getting bigger by the hour. He starts talking, says there must have been a misunderstanding. The landscaping crew thought the trees were part of the course boundary. It wasn't intentional. You know, the standard corporate soft apology where nobody is actually responsible. And I just listened. Didn't interrupt, didn't argue, just let him go through the script. Then he offered a solution. They'd plant replacement trees along the fence, smaller ones, fast-growing, visually appealing, his words. And I almost laughed. Because this is where people get it twisted, they think fixing the appearance fixes the problem. So I told him straight. Small trees don't replace a buffer. And he paused, because now he realized this wasn't about aesthetics. This was about compliance. I reminded him, calm, no edge, that the county permit required a functional barrier, not just something that looked good on a brochure, and right now, they didn't have one. Which meant that T-box, still closed, and probably staying that way. Then I showed him something else. Because while he was focused on reopening his project, I had already moved one step ahead. I explained that with the buffer gone, golf balls were now entering, or at least had the potential to enter, my property, which, legally, gave me the right to install a protective structure along my boundary. And not just a little fence. I'm talking about a full barrier, tall, solid, something in the range of 20 feet, built entirely on my side, and completely within my rights. No approval from them required. And here's the part that hit him. If I built that fence, it wouldn't just block golf balls. It would block their precious, premium view completely. That brand new tee box they invested in. It would be staring at a wall. You could actually see the moment it landed, that quiet realization that they had backed themselves into a corner. Because now, they had two problems. 1, the permit violation. 2, the possibility of me making their upgrade useless even if they fixed the first issue. He asked, finally, what do you want? Not in an aggressive way. More like someone who already knew the answer wasn't going to be cheap. So I handed him a document. An estimate, detailed, professional, from a landscaping company that specialized in mature tree installations. For large red oak trees, not saplings, not decorative pieces, fully grown, substantial enough to recreate the buffer immediately. Reinforced root systems, proper spacing, structural support to ensure survival. And on top of that, a protective net system installed on the course side to handle ball impact while the tree's fully established. It wasn't overkill. It was exactly what should have been there in the first place. He looked at the number, didn't say anything right away, just glanced past me toward the yard, then beyond that to the tee box sitting empty in the distance. Because here's what people forget. Time is money, but downtime? That's worse. Golfers were already asking questions, memberships, expectations, reputation, all tied to features that were now unusable. And every day that tee box stayed closed it cost them. He folded the paper, nodded once, and said he'd take it back to the team. Which usually means delay. But not this time. 3 days later, he was back. Different tone. No excuses, no misunderstandings, no soft language. Just agreement. They'd cover the full cost. Trees, installation, reinforcement, net system, everything. And just like that, the situation flipped. Because in the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about leverage. They cut something that protected me. And in doing that, they created a problem only I could solve. So yeah, that's how it ended. 4 trees gone, 4 trees replaced, and a multi-million-dollar project brought to a complete stop over something they probably thought nobody would question. And if you strip away all the drama, all the back and forth, what you're left with is a pretty simple truth. The lesson here is, most people don't lose these situations because they're wrong. They lose because they react emotionally before they understand what's actually happening. And I get it. You come home, something on your property is gone. Your first instinct is anger, confrontation, maybe even escalation. But that's exactly what puts you at a disadvantage. Because the other side, they're counting on that. They expect you to complain, maybe threaten, maybe even back down once they start using technical language or implying legal complexity. And once you step into that emotional space, you're no longer controlling the situation. You're reacting to it. And that's where most people lose. From a legal perspective, property lines are one of the few things that are still very black and white. Either something is on your land, or it isn't. There's no interpretation once a licensed survey confirms it. But here's the part people overlook. It's not enough to be right. You have to be able to prove you're right in a way that matters. Photos, surveys, documentation, permits, that's the language that actually moves things, not arguments. And then there's the bigger picture, the power dynamic. Because when you're dealing with a company, especially a development group, they operate on a completely different mindset. Timelines, budgets, public perception, liability, those are their pressure points, not your frustration. So when I filed that complaint, it wasn't about getting them in trouble. It was about shifting the situation into a system where rules actually apply, where they can't just smooth things over with a conversation. According to standard procedure, once a permit condition is violated, the burden shifts to the developer to fix it, not negotiate it. And that's exactly what happened. Now let's talk about something a little less obvious, because this part is where people usually get caught off guard. This is a psychological trap, the idea that bigger means more authority. They show up organized, confident, using professional language, and it creates this illusion that they must be operating within the rules, and most people don't question it. But confidence isn't compliance. And just because someone sounds like they know what they're doing, doesn't mean they're allowed to do it. The moment you start verifying instead of assuming, everything changes. And here's another layer to it, boundaries. Not just physical ones, but personal ones. Those trees weren't just wood and leaves. They represented privacy, safety, control over my own space. And when someone removes that without permission, it's not just a property issue, it feels personal. And that's exactly why it's so important not to respond personally. Because once you do, you're playing their game. The real advantage comes from stepping back, understanding the system, and using it properly. Now, could I have gone a different route? Sure. I could have yelled, threatened a lawsuit right away, maybe even hired an attorney immediately, but that would have cost time, money, and honestly, it probably would have dragged things out. Instead, I let the situation expose itself. I gathered evidence, found the weak point, the permit violation, and applied pressure where it actually mattered. And once that pressure was in place, I didn't need to fight. They solved it themselves. Now here's something I want you to think about, because this isn't just about trees or golf courses. It's about what happens when someone crosses a line, literally or figuratively, and assumes there won't be consequences. Most of the time, they're right. Because most people don't push back. Not because they can't, but because they don't know how. So the takeaway isn't get revenge. It's understand the system you're in. Know your rights. Document everything. And when something feels off, don't ignore it. Don't assume it's fine, verify. Because the moment you switch from reacting to understanding, you stop being the easy target. And that's when the entire dynamic changes. Now I'm curious, if you came home and found something on your property gone, something you knew you owned, would you have handled it the same way? Or would you have gone straight into confrontation? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think. And if you like stories like this, real situations where people push back the smart way, not the loud way, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.